Johnny Carson seemed untouchable behind the Tonight Show desk, slicing through tension with a joke and charming anyone who sat across from him. But what happened when a guest pushed too far, crossing invisible lines only Johnny could see? For 30 years, Carson ruled late night, but not everyone survived his standards. Backstage threats, live TV meltdowns. These aren't rumors. They're the untold stories of icons and rebels who tested TV's king of cool and found themselves permanently banned. Who made the list? Let's dive in. Yuri Geller. Some guests try to fool the audience. Yuri Geller tried to fool Johnny Carson and paid the price. Geller, the self-proclaimed psychic, became famous in the 1970s for bending spoons and reading minds on live TV. Carson, a magician since childhood, smelled a rat. He hated fakes, especially those who duped the public with paranormal tricks. Before Geller's big appearance in 1973, Carson called skeptic James Randi to set a trap. Geller would get only Tonight Show supplied props, locked down until airtime. No funny business. Geller took the stage oozing confidence, perfectly groomed and smiling for the cameras. But as the experiment began, sealed envelopes, untouched silverware, his bravado evaporated. "I feel drained," he mumbled, papers pressed to his forehead. The audience shifted in their seats. Carson prodded gently but wouldn't let up. "We'll give you as much time as you need in the next life," he quipped. Laughter thundered. Geller's act collapsed. Blaming studio lights, hostile energy, and even the moon's position, Geller stumbled through the segment. The audience knew. Carson knew. The spell was broken. Backstage, the verdict was instant. Geller was finished. "We exposed him as a fraud on national television. I won't provide another platform for deception," Carson told his producers. Letters poured in, some cheering the takedown, others accusing Carson of sabotage. But Carson never budged. New policies demanded all future paranormal guests use Tonight Show props, and known tricksters face permanent bans. Geller, for his part, spun the story as sabotage and went on to cash in elsewhere. But the Tonight Show stage was closed forever. Carson's ban was absolute, a message to anyone looking to con the public. The king of late night had no room for charlatans. Chevy Chase. Comedy's golden boy met late night's undisputed king and left empty-handed. Chevy Chase was flying high in 1978, riding the Saturday Night Live wave in a hit movie. When he returned to The Tonight Show, Chase swaggered in, eager to prove he was the new face of comedy. He joked about Carson's golf obsession, ribbed him about the cushy studio job, and, worst of all, joked he could out-host Johnny himself. What started as playful ribbing soured quickly. Chase bragged about box office numbers, monopolized the couch, and turned every prompt back to his own celebrity. "You've got quite the comfortable little operation here," he teased, a smirk on his face. The audience chuckled, but Carson's smile faded. During a commercial break, Chase doubled down, boasting about his Hollywood prospects and hinting that Carson's time was up. "If NBC ever needs a fresher talent at 11:30, give me a call," he quipped. The atmosphere went glacial. Backstage, Carson's anger was volcanic. 15 years building this institution, and some kid suggests he deserves my position? He's finished here. The order was swift. Chase was blacklisted, no more invitations, no more chances. Word spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Chase's Fox late-night show, years later, would flop spectacularly, and when asked if Johnny had given any advice, Chase could only admit, total silence. The ban was total. The punishment absolute. In Carson's world, you could be funny, you could be famous, but you never, ever challenged the king in his own castle. For Chevy Chase, the lesson came with a permanent lock on the Tonight Show doors. Bob Hope. Some guests walk in with stories. Bob Hope brought a script every time. For network brass, Hope was ratings gold. For Johnny Carson, he was a test of patience. Each Hope appearance came with a thick packet. Approved jokes, sponsor plugs, even camera angle requests. To an improv master like Carson, this was jazz with sheet music, a death sentence for real conversation. On air, Hope stared past Johnny, reading from cue cards and waiting for setups. Even the smallest detour threw him off. When Carson tried a spontaneous follow-up, Hope would fumble, consult his notes, then plow ahead with the next prepared punchline. Audiences laughed, but only because they were supposed to. Behind the desk, Carson's grip on his pencil tightened. The last straw came during a 1978 visit, when Hope managed 3 Texaco plugs in 7 minutes. "Texaco gets more screen time than I do," Carson quipped, but the laughter was thin. Off air, he delivered an ultimatum. "I won't conduct infomercials disguised as interviews." NBC protested. Hope brought big ad dollars, but Carson threatened to walk. The network caved. From that night, Hope's bookings dried up. There was no formal announcement, just a slow, permanent fade from the guest list. Insiders whispered, but Carson was blunt. He's not performing television. He's reciting commercials with canned laughter. The Hope band set a precedent. Authenticity was non-negotiable, even for legends. Hope would never grace the Tonight Show stage again, and Carson's dressing room finally exhaled. The message rang out. Bring your best, but leave your script at the door. Charlton Heston. Some actors command attention. Charlton Heston hijacked airtime. Known for epic roles and a voice like Rolling Thunder, Heston brought Hollywood gravitas, but also turned interviews into one-man shows. Ask him about chariot crashes in Ben-Hur, and you'd get a winding tale starting at Yale, passing through Greek philosophy, and ending in a monologue about American freedom. Carson, ever the quick-witted host, thrived on sharp question and answer. Heston, by contrast, delivered long-winded lectures. Commercial breaks didn't help. Heston filled them with off-air footnotes and asides. During one 1987 episode, he quoted Plutarch and invited Johnny to the NRA Museum, burning valuable airtime while the house band waited in silence. Producers tallied the carnage. Audience laughter plummeted, ratings dipped, and Carson's patience frayed. The final straw was a movie violence discussion turned 15-minute oration on liberty and responsibility. "He's operating his own program within my program," Carson fumed. The verdict was immediate. Heston was permanently removed from the guest list. There was no official memo, just a chilling silence when Heston's team called to rebook. Even for an Oscar winner, entertainment value ruled. Carson demanded guests who played the rhythm of TV, not self-appointed lecturers. Heston learned the hard way that even Hollywood's greatest voices can talk themselves into exile. The Tonight Show had no space for one-man filibusters. Don Rickles. Don Rickles was a Tonight Show favorite until the chaos outweighed the comedy. His weaponized wit spared no one. Guests, audience, even Johnny himself. Rickles thrived on mayhem, firing off machine gun insults with the glee of a kid breaking windows. But even the sharpest comic eventually hits a breaking point, and Rickles crossed it more than once. The infamous incident happened in 1976, when Rickles was guest hosting during Johnny's vacation. Killing time between segments, he grabbed Carson's prized walnut cigarette box, a sentimental gift from a stagehand who'd once saved Johnny during a backstage fire. Riffing for the crowd, Rickles accidentally shattered it. "Oh, I broke Carson's cigarette box," he yelled, playing it up for big laughs. The next night, Carson marched onto Rickles' CPO Sharky set, cameras rolling, demanding, "You broke my box." The moment became TV legend and a running gag in late-night lore. Off camera, though, the mood had changed. Rickles had long ignored timing lights, derailed segments, and smashed props with reckless abandon. Producers groaned as he blew through censor limits or roasted a guest a little too hard. The final straw came in 1985, when Rickles mocked an overweight woman in the audience. Complaints flooded NBC. Carson, who'd always defended Rickles' brand of chaos, finally drew the line. "Hilarious, yes. Radioactive too," he told his team. The band was swift and silent. No more Rickles. Wayne Newton. It takes guts to confront Johnny Carson in his own house, but Wayne Newton had more than guts. He had a grudge. For years, Carson's razor-sharp jokes about Newton's stage act and trademark hair were a reliable laugh line. Las Vegas is installing brighter stage lights. "Wayne Newton's hair needs photosynthesis," Carson once quipped, sending the audience into hysterics. But to Newton, the laughs cut deep. He'd spent millions acquiring the Aladdin Hotel and building a reputation as Mr. Vegas. Carson's jabs threatened to turn his career into a punchline. The final straw snapped in 1980 Without warning, Newton showed up at NBC's Burbank studios on taping day. No appointment, no smile. Security cameras captured him marching through hallways, silk shirt open, fists clenched, on a mission. Inside Carson's office, Newton delivered his ultimatum face to face. "These jokes about me stop now, or I'll kick your ass at this." Carson didn't blink. Security was summoned instantly, and Newton's name was scrubbed from every guest list that night. NBC staff received a memo, Newton's photograph attached, declaring him permanently banned. Carson never aired the confrontation or publicly shamed Newton, but quietly told confidants, "Nobody, absolutely nobody intimidates me in my own studio." Newton was done. Every script for that week was sanitized, every reference erased. The message was clear: resort to threats, and you're out for good. Newton would never set foot on Carson's stage again, and Hollywood insiders took notice. Some say the ban stung Newton more than any joke ever could. To Carson, it wasn't personal, it was a line in the sand, and Newton had stomped right over it. That night, late-night TV learned that even Vegas royalty couldn't strong-arm the king of comedy. Fred Rogers, America's gentle neighbor, seemed like the perfect Tonight Show guest. A 5-minute chat, a quick puppet demo, and a dose of wholesomeness between the Hollywood glitz. But late-night TV demands pace, not patience, and Rogers' soft-spoken warmth was a mismatch from the start. Rogers entered the studio, waved politely, and delivered his trademark gentle greeting. The applause lingered, unsure when to stop. Carson, ever ready with a joke, lifted his loafer to reveal sneakers. "Brad, I wore my sneakers in your honor." Rogers smiled and replied, "That's very thoughtful, Johnny. Sneakers can help us feel ready to play." The audience waited for a punchline, but none came. An awkward silence swallowed the room as the control booth scrambled to keep up. Every answer from Rogers landed with a pause. Jokes were dropped, pacing slowed, and producers panicked. When the commercial break finally arrived, Carson exhaled with relief. Minute-by-minute ratings tanked, and the analysis was brutal. Rogers was perfect for preschoolers, disastrous for 11:45 p.m. audiences. The verdict wasn't personal. Carson called Rogers a saint, but explained, "Saints don't succeed in late night. This industry moves too fast." Rogers was quietly never invited back. Hundreds of letters praised the appearance, but Carson stood firm. The lesson? Even the kindest souls can't survive a world built on timing, tension, and punchlines. For all his virtue, Mr. Rogers was simply too pure for Carson's world. Madonna. Late-night TV thrives on unpredictability, but there's a difference between shaking things up and tearing the whole house down. Madonna, already a superstar in the late 80s, came to The Tonight Show with her own ideas about what live television should be. During her 1987 appearance, she seemed determined to outshock, outtalk, and outmaneuver Johnny at every turn. From the opening moments, Madonna took charge, swerving around every question and veering straight into controversial territory. She pushed boundaries with risque jokes, open flirtation, and off-script provocations that even Carson, the king of improvisation, couldn't control. The audience wasn't sure whether to laugh or gasp. Carson, ever the professional, kept smiling, but the tension was visible. What producers saw was chaos. Timing cues ignored, sponsors rattled, and the control booth in full crisis mode. Madonna's unpredictability turned the legendary Carson cool into barely concealed frustration. After the show, NBC execs were blunt. Carson, never one to back down, told his team, "There's a difference between being unpredictable and being impossible." Behind closed doors, the word was out, Madonna would not be invited back. It wasn't a moral judgment or an issue with stardom. It was about control. Carson's show ran on timing, trust, and unspoken respect for the host's authority. Madonna's boundary pushing made headlines, but it also made her persona non grata behind the Burbank doors. For a show built on letting guests shine, this was one star who refused to play by anyone's rules but her own. The result? Permanent exile and another cautionary tale for Hollywood's risk-takers. Joan Rivers. No feud in late-night history ever burned as quietly and as publicly as Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers. For decades, Rivers was the ultimate Tonight Show guest, sharp, fearless, and perfectly in tune with Carson's rhythm. She was so trusted, in fact, that she regularly guest hosted, holding the desk whenever Johnny was away. But trust in Hollywood can turn overnight. In 1986, Rivers stunned the industry by announcing she'd be hosting her own late-night show on Fox, a direct competitor to The Tonight Show. She never called Johnny first. Carson, who believed in personal loyalty above all, felt blindsided. "I gave her her first big break," he confided to friends. "She didn't even pick up the phone." The news was public before Johnny heard a word. The fallout was swift and total. Rivers was banned permanently. No more appearances, no more guest hosting, no more phone calls. For decades, Carson refused to speak her name, and the show's guest list enforced the blacklist with unwavering discipline. Other comedians saw the message loud and clear. Cross the king, and you're cut off for good. Rivers went on to build her own legacy, but the wound never healed. She spoke many times about the pain of Carson's silence. But Johnny never relented. The ban was never about ratings or even rivalry. It was about trust, betray it, and you lost not just a platform but a mentor and a friend. For the rest of her life, Rivers would be asked about Carson's ban, and her answer was always the same. "I wish it hadn't ended that way." On The Tonight Show, the lesson was final. Loyalty mattered as much as laughter. The Sex Pistols. Booking the Sex Pistols on The Tonight Show sounded like a producer's fever dream, a chance to capture the wildest band of the punk era and bring their chaotic energy to Middle America. But Carson's show thrived on careful anarchy, not total meltdown. And when the Pistols finally got their shot, they delivered exactly what Johnny feared. The band showed up late, obviously inebriated, and immediately set about antagonizing the staff, the audience, and Carson himself. Swearing, throwing objects, openly mocking the band leader, and refusing to answer any question straight. The Pistols turned the hallowed Studio One into a battleground. At one point, Sid Vicious nearly toppled a camera. Security was on edge. The control room was in panic. Carson, always game for a challenge, tried to rein them in with sharp quips and cool detachment, but there was no containing the mayhem. By the end of the segment, NBC had racked up more complaints than any appearance that year. Carson's verdict was immediate. Never again. Booking memos were updated, and producers were told in no uncertain terms, no more punk acts who treated the set like a mosh pit. The Sex Pistols ban was as spectacular as their rise. Fast, loud, and absolute. The band may have worn it like a badge of honor, but for Carson, the message was business, not rebellion. Anarchy might sell records, but it never gets a return ticket to late-night royalty. Robert Blake. Some bands were about behavior, others were about reputation. Robert Blake, once a respected actor and Tonight Show regular, fell from grace in the most public way possible. In 2001, Blake was arrested for the murder of his wife, a case that would turn into one of the decade's biggest Hollywood scandals. But even before the trial began, Carson's team had seen enough. While Carson was nearing retirement, his booking team and NBC's standards office took swift action. Blake, who had already been known for temperamental behavior and difficult backstage demands, was instantly blacklisted from all NBC late-night properties. Carson himself, a stickler for image and the integrity of his brand, reportedly signed off on the ban. The scandal turned the Tonight Show's green room into a zone of whispered rumors and emergency meetings. Even after Blake was acquitted in criminal court, the ban remained ironclad. No amount of fame or notoriety could outweigh the damage to the Tonight Show's reputation. For Carson and his producers, the decision wasn't just about one guest. It was about protecting the legacy of the show and everyone who appeared on it. Blake's exile was a reminder. Sometimes just being associated with scandal was enough to shut the door forever. In a world where reputations are everything, Carson never gambled with the brand he'd built brick by brick. Oliver Reed. The Tonight Show saw its fair share of wild guests, but few left a trail of chaos quite like Oliver Reed. The British actor, known as much for his off-screen brawling as his on-screen bravado, arrived for his appearance already several drinks ahead of the staff. What followed became the stuff of NBC legend. From the first moment, Reed dominated the set, slurring his words, interrupting Carson's questions, and making lewd jokes at the expense of both the host and the audience. When Carson attempted to steer the interview back to Reed's latest film, Reed instead launched into a drunken, rambling monologue about the artistry of drinking. Producers frantically signaled for commercial, but the damage was done. The fallout was immediate. Carson, who could handle just about any eccentric, saw Reed's appearance as a direct challenge to the dignity of the show. He instructed his team, "Never again." "We're not a pub." Booking memos went out, and Reed's name was crossed off for good. Other guests, even those with a reputation for unpredictability, took notice. If Oliver Reed could get banned for a single appearance, nobody was safe from Carson's high standards. The Tonight Show survived wild nights and wild guests, but when entertainment turned to embarrassment, the door slammed shut, no matter how famous the name on the call sheet. Brigitte Nielsen. Sometimes a guest brings more baggage than even late night can carry. Brigitte Nielsen, model, actress, and tabloid magnate, brought her unfiltered honesty and a reputation for pushing every boundary to The Tonight Show in the late 1980s. Carson was famous for handling strong personalities, but Nielsen's appearance became a textbook case in what happens when reality TV energy crashes into traditional talk show decorum. From the start, Nielsen dominated the couch. She turned every topic into an anecdote about her high-profile romances, name-dropped Hollywood's elite, and gave unscripted confessions that made censors sweat bullets. Carson tried to redirect, but every nudge just led to more tabloid fodder. At one point, she openly critiqued Carson's own love life on air, leaving the audience gasping. Backstage, the control room braced for impact. Sponsors called, NBC's standards team reviewed the tape, and Carson himself gave a rare post-show debrief. "There's honest, and then there's reckless," he reportedly told producers. The decision was swift. Nielsen would not be invited back. For Carson, the lesson was simple. Personal stories were fine, but guests who used The Tonight Show as a confessional booth threatened the delicate balance of entertainment and class that defined the brand. Nielsen's ban became a legend in its own right, a warning to future guests that Johnny's stage was for wit and warmth, not open mic night for Hollywood's messiest secrets. Sinead O'Connor. No show wanted headlines for the wrong reasons. Sinead O'Connor, the Irish singer famous for her haunting voice and political stands, walked into The Tonight Show in the early 90s carrying more than just her music. O'Connor had made news worldwide with her outspoken activism and dramatic live TV moments. Producers worried, but Carson believed in giving guests their moment, until she turned it into a firestorm. During the segment, O'Connor began with music, then veered into politics. She denounced institutions, dropped controversial statements about the American government, and refused to stick to any question or lighthearted prompt. Audience members looked uneasy. Sponsors bristled. Carson kept his poker face, but as soon as the segment ended, he gave his verdict: no encore. NBC's ban was unofficial but absolute. O'Connor's name was quietly blacklisted across all late-night properties. Staff were briefed, no more appearances. The message was clear. Carson welcomed strong opinions, but not guests who used the stage to spark national controversy. In the years that followed, the story became a footnote in late-night history, but insiders knew the truth. Sometimes being unforgettable means never being invited back. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was one of the most electric comedians ever to sit across from Johnny Carson, a man whose very presence could change the temperature in Studio One. Pryor's appearances were always unpredictable, a blend of brilliant stand-up, raw honesty, and stories that danced along the edge of TV censors' nightmares. Carson, a huge admirer, walked the tightrope as best he could. But even admiration has its limits. In the late 1970s, Pryor pushed those limits to the brink. On one legendary night, fueled by backstage drama and personal demons, Pryor let loose with a stream of consciousness riff that included language topics and true stories that sent censors scrambling for the bleep button. Carson, eyes twinkling but jaw clenched, tried to steer things back to safe ground. It was no use. The broadcast became a case study in what could and couldn't air on network television. Producers huddled after the taping. Carson loved Pryor's genius, but standards were standards. The decision was reluctant but final. Pryor was quietly banned, a move that stunned comedy insiders, but made perfect sense to those who knew Carson's rules. "He's the best," Carson admitted, "but sometimes too much is too much." Pryor's ban never made headlines, but it lasted until Carson's retirement. Pryor's legend grew even as his Tonight Show seat stayed empty, a reminder that even genius can go too far, and that for Carson, boundaries weren't just about network policy. They were about respect for the audience and the show itself. Behind every sparkling monologue, there was a line, sometimes invisible, always final. Cross it, and you join the unforgettable, but forever unwelcome. Carson didn't hold grudges, he held the standard. In a world hooked on second chances, The Tonight Show proved that sometimes there's no coming back. Which band surprised you most? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more Hollywood legends and untold truths, because on Carson's stage, the real stories were always just out of sight.